On today's show, the Kings introduced their two new rookies, Colby Jones and Jalen Slawson, to the Sacramento media. You're going to hear interviews with them. Plus, I spoke with a reporter who covered Colby Jones' career with Xavier. He's going to join me to tell us a little bit more about what the Kings are getting in Jones right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off-season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. I just got back to the ABC 10 studios. I'm here in my office from the introductory press conference of the two new Kings rookies. Now, I'm not going to be playing for you any of the audio or anything from the press conference itself. You can go and check that out. It's going to be posted on like ABC 10's YouTube channel, abc10.com, and things like that. I'm sure you can get it in a lot of different areas as well. But I will be sharing for you here in just a second my partner Kevin John and myself's interview with both Colby Jones and Jalen Slawson. We spent a few minutes with both of them. And then stick around because, like I mentioned, after those interviews and a quick break, I sat down with Rick Broering, who covers Xavier basketball for 24/7 Sports. And he provided a lot of really, really good and interesting perspective on Colby Jones, maybe why he slid to the second round, but what he brings the Sacramento Kings, things that will probably excite you as Kings fans. We discussed what his potential role would be here in Sacramento, amongst many other things. So a lot of really, really good stuff here in this podcast about the two new Kings rookies. I want to hear your thoughts on these two and any of your impressions that you have, what you would do with both of them if you were the Kings and Mike Brown. I imagine Jalen Slawson is likely to get probably a two-way contract, although I have nothing to confirm that. It's just my gut feeling on the situation. But as you'll hear in these interviews, my feeling with Colby Jones is that he might just take a main roster spot. Might not mean he's part of the rotation or getting consistent playing time right away, but there's a good chance that he just makes the roster outright. So we'll get to see the two of them in action in the California Classic and Summer League starting next week, which is really exciting. So I want to hear your thoughts on the two of them. You can reach me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. But for now, enjoy my conversations, or my colleague. You're going to hear his voice, Kevin John, and myself speaking with first Colby Jones and then second Jalen Slawson.
One thing I want to ask you, something I just heard you tell Chris Biederman there. You said this was one of the places you wanted to come to. Why the Kings?
Yeah, I mean, just with the overall fit, it's a great young roster, and I feel like I can come in and help away. And the pieces that they're looking for, I feel like it described me. And just overall, just like when I came and worked out, saw the facilities, saw the little city around here, and I just felt really good about it.
Have you heard anything about the fans here in Sacramento and how loud and raucous and all that stuff is?
Yeah, definitely. When we had our tour, just walking around in the arena, they were telling us about how loud it gets in there. And then just all the interaction I've been getting on social media, just is very warm welcome.
You talked about the roster with the Kings and how you feel that you can fit in. Obviously, there's a lot of depth. You know you're going to have to battle for playing time. I heard you say up there, nothing is giving. How are you mentally approaching coming into Summer League with this team?
Yeah, just really just trying to go in and work hard and just try to get better and better, because I know playing against guys in the Summer League, I was going to get a lot better, just more experience. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
You're someone who can obviously play on both sides of the court. Obviously, you know, Mike Brown, his pedigree, his defense, and, you know, he'll preach that a million times if you haven't already heard it. How have you been able to kind of internalize Mike Brown's wishes and how he envisions you fitting into this team?
Yeah, I feel like just with the experience I've already had at Xavier and in high school, I mean, I played with Coach Miller. He's very defensive-minded as well. So I feel like I've gained a lot of just knowledge from playing with him, and I felt confident I'd be able to come in and step up.
I know you appreciate, and there's always special feelings towards the team that drafts you, but for a team to trade up to get you, is that a little extra special knowing that they wanted you that much?
Yeah, it's definitely special. I mean, just to feel wanted, I mean, it's a great feeling, and I mean, the feeling is mutual. So, I mean, I'm just really excited to be here.
Do you have any nerves, shall I say? Obviously this is, it's a big stage, playing on the next level and whatnot. How do you, poise yourself? And obviously we've seen it at Xavier, but now on this level, is there meditation? Is there anything that you're using in order to, help you out there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of nerves because it's a new whole situation. But yeah, a lot of journaling. I do that a lot, and just trying to remind myself that it's just basketball. I mean, I've been playing this my whole life, so just kind of keep it at that.
About In-N-Out, and are you excited to have some burgers?
I know In-N-Out's pretty good. I know it's a West Coast thing. I'm obviously from as far as possible East Coast. I haven't had In-N-Out. I'm excited to try it, though.
All right, now down to business. Obviously, the reason you're here, which is not to try In-N-Out, but to obviously play for the Sacramento Kings. If you can just describe just the excitement, the emotion. I watched one of your interviews right afterward, and you were talking about what it meant to have your family and friends supporting you. But if you could just talk a little bit more about the emotion of actually being here on the big stage, literally.
Yeah. It's still surreal. I've had 23 years full of dreams about being here, and now I'm here, and it still doesn't feel real. So, I don't know when it's going to set in. It'll set in eventually, but right now I'm enjoying it. But I also know it's time to get to work. So I got my first workout here in a couple hours. So.
Let's build off of that. Time to get to work. Obviously, as you said up here, nothing is given to you. You have to come in and earn every minute that you're on the court. When you look at this team, obviously how good that they played last year, the depth that they have, how do you see yourself fitting into that, and how do you feel about competing against it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I can fit in because I'm a multi-positional defender, pretty versatile. I'm young, so I'm going to be willing to listen, whatever the guys tell me to do. But just doing whatever I can to get out on the floor, whatever the team needs me to do, make myself fit in. If no matter what I have to do, we'll figure out a way to make myself fit in.
I'm curious if there's any similarities you see between Furman and the Sacramento Kings. For one, over the last season, you guys both the Kings and Furman made a run deep into the postseason and the tournament and whatnot, and kind of, for lack of better words, surprised, kind of were like the quote-unquote Cinderella story, or just kind of surprised a lot of people.
Yeah.
How do you feel that the similarities between both franchises and teams kind of will aid you in this transition?
Well, number one, we both wear purple. That's number one. That's number one obvious factor. But, I feel like when I came to Furman, it was a program on the rise. And I helped continue that, and then much of the same here. Sacramento's turned this around. I hear a lot about the fans. The fans are really bought in. Obviously, Coach Brown's really bought in. Monty's really bought in. So, their ability to create buy-in and get people and players that are bought into the culture, and you see it everywhere around here. Coach Brown has a contract that the whole team signed. So Coach Ritchie would do similar things to that at Furman. The culture, the values, much of that is the same. And then, Furman snapped a 40-something year drought last year. Sacramento snaps a 16-year drought. I don't know when the last time Sacramento won a playoff series was, but hopefully Colby and I get to be, rookies on the team that help change that.
I'm sure you're welcome to the NBA moment still to come, check into your first game or whatever it is, but walking into the practice facility for the first time, walking into the Golden One Center for the first time and realizing, this is home, this is where I'm going to be spending my career, at least to start. What was that like for you? Was that like an I've arrived moment? Or?
Nah, I definitely haven't arrived. There's so much work to do because the moment I start to think I've arrived, this can be an old home instead of a current home. Colby and I know we have work to do, and our welcome to the NBA moment hopefully will come during the season. There's much more work to do than right now. Just being here, getting here. This is only the beginning.
Now, just out of curiosity, as long as the players, I know that you guys spoke to a few players coming here. Was there anyone in particular you were excited to play with or, fraternize with who's here? And who, if so, who?
Nobody in particular. I know my nephew idolizes De'Aaron, so he's asking me all the time, have you met De'Aaron? Have you met De'Aaron? Let me know when you see De'Aaron. So De'Aaron came up and introduced himself at breakfast earlier, and I texted him hey, I finally met De'Aaron, and he about lost his mind. So that was cool for him. But I'm excited to play with whoever's out on the court with me, whoever I can get on the court with. Obviously, I'm excited to play with Colby in summer league. Keon, one of my good buddies, I have a mutual friend with Keon, so those would be interesting guys to be with.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when it comes to getting parts for your car and when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The Sacramento Kings technically didn't have a first-round pick in this 2023 NBA draft. However, many are saying that they still got a first-round talent in Colby Jones out of Xavier. And here to tell us a little bit more about Colby and what he's bringing to the Sacramento Kings, Rick Broering, who is the from 24/7 Sports covering Xavier Hoops, joins me. Rick, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Welcome into the Locked On Kings podcast. First off, my friend, tell us, what are the Sacramento Kings getting in Colby Jones?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and you heard the Kings front office talk a little bit about this the night of the draft, is that you're getting a versatile player, a utility player, a guy who can do a lot of different things, and a two-way player, a guy who can really get it done defensively as much as he does offensively. And I think that's actually an area where NBA scouts see room for him to improve, too. I think he can even get better on the defensive end than he was his previous few years at Xavier, because you saw him take a step forward last year under Sean Miller's tutelage on that end of the floor. So I think that's one area where he has a lot of room to grow. But I think those are the main things, and also just a really high IQ player. He's been that way since he was at the high school level. He's always been a good playmaker who understands the game.
You may have touched on it a little bit there, but a well-rounded player, sometimes we'll see these well-rounded prospects and say they do a lot of things well, but they don't have like an NBA ready skill. Does Colby have a certain skill that's like, this is plug and play into the NBA, it should be seamless?
Yeah, if we're being honest, I think that may be the reason you saw him slide from late in the first round to early in the second round. He was on anywhere in that range with all the projections throughout the last few weeks. So it wasn't really a surprise to see him go where he went. But some of the more optimistic prognosticators had him going as high as like top 20 or 21, 22 range. So I think the reason he probably didn't go that high is because of what you're alluding to. The fact that he's really good at a lot of things, but probably not elite at anything. And I don't even know if you have one certain thing that you'd point to as this is definitely an NBA level skill for him. I think the biggest thing that you're going to be hoping for is, one, his playmaking ability on the offensive end continues to improve so that he can be a really solid secondary playmaker off the ball, in addition to being efficient on the offensive end.
We hear rookies say the right thing all the time, which is, I'll do whatever my team needs from me, right? But that doesn't always translate to the core at the NBA level, because the rookies say that they'll do that, but maybe they can't actually perform what the team needs of them. I don't necessarily know. I'm not going to get into the head of Mike Brown and the Kings coaching staff and absolutely pinpoint what I think Colby Jones would need to do for the Sacramento Kings, but looking at him as more as a two, it's spacing the floor. It's especially helping on the defensive end. But ultimately, in your mind, Colby's ability to embrace and fill a role on a team, do you think he's kind of the perfect guy? Because I think Monty McNair selected him with the belief that he'll be able to be molded into what the Sacramento Kings need specifically from a player of his caliber.
Absolutely. And that's probably the best part about Colby. And really, it's something that he was almost too good at while he was at Xavier. the knock on him at Xavier was always, we need an alpha out of Colby Jones. We need him to be a go-to scorer and not be so willing to make the right play all the time, not be so willing to find the open teammate and make plays for other guys. And he really does fit in well as a role guy, a utility guy, a guy that can do a little bit of everything and fill gaps for you. The thing for Xavier is he kind of made that jump his last year into being more of a, as a junior, or 2 years ago as a sophomore, he was a guy who had 2 games of 20 or more points. One of them was the very last game of the season, the NIT championship, which they won. And that was really the NIT run where they made that run and won it all, was kind of where you started to see him come into his own as more of a go-to player. Last year for Xavier, he scored 20 or more points 9 different times. So I think you saw him step into that role a little bit more as a scorer and obviously a 3-point shooter. He saw a big jump in his numbers there last season. But in terms of being able to fit, or maybe the correct word is being more willing to fit into a role, there are no questions about that with Colby. I think he will be very natural when it comes to trying to become a more efficient player while taking fewer shots.
What do you attribute that growth offensively in terms of his shooting numbers and his scoring numbers? Do you attribute that to a growth in confidence from his sophomore to junior year, or do you attribute that more to the team saying, this is what we need out of you, and he's so good at embracing his role that he committed himself to that aspect?
A few things to look at there. One, Colby is a really hard worker. So I genuinely believe he has put in tons and tons of time into improving that skill. And so he actually just got significantly better over the last few years. I also think if you go back to his sophomore season, the coaching staff then, Travis Steele at the time, before it changed over to Sean Miller, was saying, we want Colby to shoot more threes. He's one of our better shooters in practice, even though the percentages aren't necessarily saying that from game play. So I think it was always there to some extent over the last 2 seasons. You just saw him do it a lot more in gameplay last season. And the biggest reason for that, I think, is Sean Miller's offense. I think they were a lot more in sync in terms of what shots they were supposed to be taking and getting really good quality looks. And that is probably a reason he saw a boost in his percentage as well.
He's really going to have to fight to consistently crack the Kings rotation at his position, with guys like Malik Monk and Davion Mitchell already coming off the bench, assuming both are still there when the Sacramento Kings headed to training camp in this fall, plus already De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter kind of established as that 1 and 2. If he's going to crack that rotation, that means he's establishing himself in a specific way that Mike Brown says, okay, like, we got to get this kid out there. He's really going to help us. To me, that way is on defense. But you've watched his entire career at Xavier. You followed him. Like, what do you think he could do or bring immediately to the Kings? And he doesn't have to crack the rotation right away. Of course, it could be 30 games into the season. But what do you think, as a rookie, is going to be the easiest for him to establish at the NBA level that can maybe get him into a consistent rotational spot?
So I've been saving this because I didn't want to ruin any of your questions, and I apologize if you have this coming up if you wanted a comparison. I'm not a comparison guy at all. My followers at Musketeer Report, Xavier's 24/7 site, will tell you I hate doing player comparisons because I think they usually are terrible. But even when Colby committed to Xavier back as a high school prospect, the first comparison that I wrote up, and you can go back and check this, the impact Colby Jones, if you want to look it up, I called him Josh Hart. I said, if he reaches his potential, he will look a lot like Josh Hart. And I think you saw a very similar progression throughout their college careers, including the shooting really well their final season of college basketball from 3-point distance, making that jump, which was kind of the last thing I think a lot of NBA scouts wanted to see from both of them. That to me is still the path for Colby. It has become Josh Hart, become a guy who can give you, and obviously not as a rookie, but over the course of his career, become a guy who can give you starter quality play without being a guy that needs to take 10 or more shots a game. He can take 5, 6 shots. He'll make one of those as a 3-pointer probably that'll knock down. He'll get you a handful of assists. And the one big thing that Josh Hart has done is a really high level that I think is sneaky is he rebounds the heck out of the ball. And that's something that Colby is very good at from the wing position too. If you have a shooting guard or maybe even a small forward, if you get in a pinch at that spot and you want to slide him down a spot because he is tough and strong and athletic, maybe you can do that. He goes in and gets you 7 or 8 rebounds in those types of minutes. If you're playing him starting minutes, we're talking probably 2 or 3 years down the road at this point. But if he can do that, then I could see him sticking and having a Josh Hart-like impact on a team. And as far as what that looks like as a rookie, I think, again, go back to Josh Hart at the beginning of his career. It's a lot of those same things, which, as you pointed out, probably starts on the defensive end more than anything.
Well, that might be the perfect. Mike has wanted more rebounding out of his entire team, period, and rebounding at times. I mean, rebounding did the Kings in their playoff series against the Golden State Warriors, their inability to keep the Warriors off the offensive glass. So maybe that is his route. Simply the rebounding is his route to why he's got to be out there just because of the presence that he is on the glass. I love the Josh Hart comparison, and I think a lot of Sacramento Kings fans do too, because Josh Hart is a target that Kings fans would love to see the Sacramento Kings go out and get in free agency, although it's likely he returns to New York. So that's music to people's ears. But I understand, like, player comparisons can be misleading. Player comparisons can be kind of slippery and or flat out wrong. Only time will tell with that. And the same thing how I feel with like floors and ceilings, right? Like, to me, there were a lot of low ceilings, high floor labels put on Keegan Murray last year. And I think he's already shattered those and is going to continue to shatter those. But if I'm to go against my own feelings and viewpoints on floor and ceiling, like from an NBA career standpoint, what do you think is the ceiling, or maybe like the ideal, if we talk about Colby Jones at the end of his NBA career 15 years from now, how he establishes himself in the league? What do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like again, the ceiling floor thing is tough for me too, just to think of it in that way. I really see an ideal career progression being very similar to what like Josh Hart looks like. I've heard Malcolm Brogdon thrown out there a little bit, which I think is an interesting one a little bit. I can see some similarities. I think Brogdon's probably a better shooter overall than Colby is, and play like wants to shoot a little more than Colby does as a spot up guy. But overall, I can see some comparisons there. So maybe that's a good name to kind of look at as what he could potentially be if things really work out as well as possible for him. I don't think he's ever a guy that you look to be like, come be our first or second scorer on a team or anything like that. I think he will always be a off the ball option who can make some plays and really do a lot of different things, rebounding, defense. Again, I mean, going back to your original question, which is what is his best skill or most NBA ready skill? What's the same question you'd ask about Josh Hart? Like, what is his best skill? Does he have an elite level skill? I don't know, but he does a lot of things really well, and he's a really efficient player. And I think that's hopefully where Colby is trending.
Well, Kings fans always rally around players who give their all. And it sounds like as a player, Colby is going to give his all when he's on the floor. And that's going to win a lot of people over, I think, really quickly in Sacramento. We might see that here in the California Classic and Summer League next week, believe it or not. But what about Colby Jones, the person? Like, what is Colby like as a human being, a teammate? The Kings are coming off of a year where the vibes were great. Now there's expectations. The vibes were great, but in the locker room, they had defensive player of the game chains. They lit their own beams with laser pointers. They're always celebrating, taking pictures afterwards. Some people thought it was obnoxious, but that was the camaraderie of this group. Can you see Colby Jones just naturally fitting right into that?
Perfect fit, like legit. And I kind of hate the thing media members do where we all act like because they answer questions for us for an hour once a week that we know these guys personally. It's like, oh yeah, he's a great kid. It's like, right. I don't know what he's doing during his off time, right? Like, he's great around me. I know that. I hear nothing but positive things about him when he's in the locker room with his teammates and from the coaching staff. There's nothing but positive things said about Colby Jones. They all seem to love him. And I'll just tell you this, he's a smart guy. Like, you can tell that just from interacting with him over the years. He's I think he was down to like Stanford and Xavier, whereas two options in college. So he's definitely a dude who like had some focus on academics when he was figuring out where he was going to end up. And just super, like, honestly, looking back at how things worked out for Xavier, they had a coaching change where like things, they changed coaches after the first round of the NIT last year. And it looked like you might lose the whole team after that. And because you had a guy like Colby, who everyone really loves, and Adam Kunkel was another guy who was kind of, they were best friends and kind of teammates and the leaders of that group from a personal standpoint, they rally the locker room together. They win the NIT. Then all of those guys say, you know what, let's not get in the transfer portal. Let's run it back with this new coaching staff. And we've got good leaders in this locker room. And Colby was a huge, huge presence and part of that. So to your point, he will have absolutely zero problems fitting into a locker room, wanting to be around the right type of guys who do things the right way. You're not going to hear about him partying or doing anything, no crazy antics. He's just like a yes sir, no sir type of guy. Really fun to be around and really charismatic.
Finally, Rick, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I don't know how familiar you are with the Kings roster or the Kings situation, of course, but like I most of the time it's the veteran that picks the rookie, right? You're my rookie. Like, follow me. I'm gonna lead you. But based off your knowledge of the Kings roster, like whether it's De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, whoever it may be, it could even be a big man. We see a lot of big men who are veteran mentors to guards, which makes no sense to me, but hey, it works. Like, is there a player that you think on the Kings roster that Colby Jones would really benefit from learning from or following or being taken under that player's wing?
That's a good question. I don't know if I know those guys well enough to really make that type of statement. But one thing about Colby is I don't know that he's the type of guy that needs that as much. I mean, you always would like that, but Colby's kind of a natural leader. So I think, he's not a guy that needs to be shown, hey, don't be doing this late at night. This is how we need to work out. He'll understand how to do all that on his own or seek it out on his own. So he'll find the best people to be around and put himself in the best position. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer to that, but I probably don't know those guys well enough personally.
That's perfect, Rick. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate you. Before I let you go, like covering Xavier hoops, but all the work that you do, you also have a podcast as well. Like tell everybody a little bit about, and Kings fans, about what it is that you do, what you provide, because it wouldn't shock me at all if there's more Xavier prospects on the Kings radar in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate it. I cover all my Xavier stuff is at musketeerreport.com, or if you're familiar with the 24/7 Sports Recruiting Network, it's the team site on there. So you can find it through there if you just search that or my name. And also I do some local sports coverage in the Cincinnati area, covering the Reds, the Bengals, doing a podcast about that. And I also do the color analysis on radio for Northern Kentucky University basketball.
Amazing. He's a man of many talents, and I got to steal him here on Locked On Kings for a little bit. Rick, appreciate your time, my friend. Hopefully I'll be chatting with you soon. Maybe we'll have you back on early on in the season when we see what Colby's bringing to the Sacramento Kings and get maybe a training camp under our belts to see what he can do. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
It was a pleasure to meet both Colby and Jalen today. Really like those two young men. Great first impressions that they made. Hopefully that translated through the interviews that you heard on today's podcast. Then big shout out to Rick for all the help that he provided, all the just incredible insight that he provided. It was a real pleasure to have him on. I look forward to having him back on the podcast in the near future, maybe after we get some summer league under our belts, to see a little bit of what both Colby and Jalen can do. I don't know if you saw the reports today, but Kyle Kuzma to the Sacramento Kings is picking up steam. Now, ESPN 1320 has been reporting that initially the Kings and Harrison Barnes were pretty far along on contract negotiations and seemed like they were well on their way to coming up with a deal. And then around 2 weeks ago, things just completely stopped. Things went quiet on both ends. So it seems like as we get closer and closer to a free agency beginning this Friday, it seems like Harrison returning to the Sacramento Kings is less and less likely. It's definitely not out. It's definitely not impossible, but it seems like things are going in the direction of no Harrison Barnes going forward. And it sounds like, according to reports today, the Kings and Kyle Kuzma are picking up some steam. Kyle Kuzma makes sense for different reasons. But of course, he comes with that personality, and he comes definitely with question marks, but some seem to think that he would be a great fit in Sacramento. So what are your thoughts on Kyle Kuzma joining the Sacramento Kings in free agency? I'm sure that's something we'll discuss later on this week. I'm also excited about tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast. Actually, right after I finish recording and posting this episode today, I have an interview with Bob Ritchie, who is the head coach of Furman basketball. He was Jalen Slawson's head coach in college. Bob and I are going to, of course, talk about Jalen, learn a little bit more about him. That full interview will be released on tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast, so I hope you will join me for that. Until then, my name is Matt George. Thank you so much for your support. As always, can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, this has been the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.